Hey guys, welcome to episode 7 of the General Future Podcast. This is a very special episode brought to you live from New York. I am staying at my cousin's apartment on the Bowery while Sierra is at work, and I just thought I'd tag along on this trip just so I can spend some time in the city again. This week, or rather this episode, I am joined by my two nephews, Matthew and Ryan. They're a couple of young guns living it up in New York. Okay, let's go. What's up, guys? So this is the General Future Podcast. General Future Podcast. I got my cousins here, Matt, Ryan.
Hey.
They are my cousins' kids, so I call them my nephews, but not really like actual nephews. Do you hear that?
Yeah,
Talking?
Is that audiobook?
I think it might be a neighbor or something. It's all right. But yeah, so I'm visiting New York after some time away. Obviously, I used to live here too. You guys live here now. I think the biggest thing that I'm always curious to know about is what's going on in the city, because shit changes so fast. And not to mention, you guys have a different perspective on what it is that you guys are doing in the city, what it is that you're looking to get out of it, the kinds of difficulties and the challenges that you guys are running into. And yeah, just to talk about that a little bit. And just, again, we haven't seen each other for a while, so just catching up and seeing how you guys are doing.
I have no idea what's going on in this city. I have a very narrow perspective on life in general.
Yeah.
And the things I do, the way I spend my time. But in terms of the things I do, comp season and climbing is coming up. And in the Northeast, and specifically in New York City, there's like this huge circuit of climbing competitions. And there's like a bunch of different categories, like open, and then which is kind of like the competitive circuit, and then you have your citizen circuit, so advanced, intermediate, and beginner. And there's these huge bouldering competitions, and there'd be big parties after each one, and they just come like one after another, and so that's about to get started. The winter season is ending, which means that we'll be going outside. The weather is getting better. What else is going on?
How long have you been living in the city, first off, real quick?
It's 2021, so what is it, like 3 years?
Okay. What about
Been here
you?
for like a year and a half now.
Year and a half? And sorry, I just wanted to get that out of the way. But with this climbing and the different circuits, like one thing that I'm curious about is like the different levels, like beginner, advanced, like intermediate. Like how do those get determined? Is that like
It's self-selection. So you register. The open circuit is like pros. The pros compete in the open circuit, and it's cool because the pros and the amateurs, I wouldn't even call them like just regular people, compete in the same competition, like on the same day. So that's pretty cool. But if you register as a beginner and you get a certain score, you get automatically, your score gets placed into the bracket above.
Okay.
So if you're like sandbagging yourself,
right,
and you want to do better and you go into beginner, you probably end up at the bottom of intermediate.
Right.
So there's like a checks and balances in that.
And is that from competition to competition, or is it like how does that work? If someone's sandbagging, saying they're beginner, and like how would that person get placed into intermediate, and then do they get a chance to then compete against the intermediate people? Or
I'm pretty sure the registration is by event. So you could compete in the beginner one competition and then compete in the intermediate the next competition.
Yeah.
There is a cumulative score. I don't know how that works, but yeah, it's by event, so it's whatever happens in that day, it's just that day.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
And so Matthew, you were living here, initially moved here to go to school, but you're not going to school anymore. Can you tell me a little bit more about your day-to-day life? Like, tell me about that narrow focus or perspective that you currently have on the city and
Sure.
what that's like.
Well, right now I'm not going to school, and I'm in between kind of two parts of my life. The biggest thing I'm doing now is just working at the climbing gym and climbing a bunch. I'm waiting to start an EMT job at NYU Langone, which I just finished school for at that same hospital in December. And so I spend a lot of my time just working and then climbing. That's actually pretty much it.
Yeah.
And I'm also prepping for a trip to Nepal. And it's a like a wilderness medical course in Nepal. So I'm studying for that and also like upping my fitness
Mhm.
and just my mental game for the high altitude,
For sure.
and then studying up on the culture and language.
Ryan.
Yes. So your initial question was just kind of like what's happening in the city.
Yeah.
And I think very similar to him, like your whole life, right? It's just like you. So whatever your experience you think is like, oh, that's what's happening in New York. But like
Yeah.
when you think about it, I rarely leave, I'd say like East First Street to East 12th Street and then like 8th Ave and First Ave. Like I don't really leave that box. So like him, I think I have a very narrow understanding of what's kind of going on in the city as a whole. But for me, just kind of day to day is going to my classes. I'm studying hospitality management at NYU. And I've just kind of always been interested in hospitality and food and beverage, all of that stuff. So coming here to learn and be in the city to, find job opportunities and stuff like that is really why I think I'm here. But yeah, no, it's been definitely an adjustment first year and a half. Coming in as like had some experience in like a city, but nothing really compares to New York, I don't think. And being raised in the suburbs and then going to high school in the suburbs is kind of like I realized I really like that kind of slower, quieter pace.
Yeah.
But obviously the city has so much to offer, so
Right. It's
it's a trade-off.
yeah, 100%. I think, I'm here now after time away, and I think my primary circle in Manhattan anyway was kind of like what you described, like kind of like the downtown, First Ave to Eighth Ave. But there's still so much that you can like kind of get a peek into, just even within that smaller area in New York.
There's so much.
There's so much.
That's what I realized in the city.
Yeah.
Any kind of person is here. Like in terms of like what they think, what they do, how they spend their time, stuff like that.
Yeah.
No matter what it is, there's like a good number of people that do that here. And probably in that box they all exist. So it's
Yeah.
just insane.
It's pretty wild. I think that's like the biggest downside to the suburbs is it's either the fact that everyone who is into like a specific thing only runs in those circles, even though there's like, the Chicagoland suburb, like the Chicagoland area, population wise, it's huge, but then everyone's just getting around in their cars, going to their specific spots. And it's very easy to come to think that, that's all there is. I'm sure there's more diversity than what people think of when they think of the suburbs. It's just that you don't get to see it because your life is kind of like on a track in the suburbs, but in the city, you're kind of exposed to it wherever you're at. I don't know, like, could you see yourselves living in New York City, like, for how much longer? Like, it's not like a permanent thing, right?
Fuck no. I would not like to live here that long.
Yeah.
But definitely for a while.
Yeah.
Like by that I mean like next 5 or so years.
And you guys are how old again? 20,
I'm 20.
21.
21? Jeez, you guys are young. I keep
About to be
thinking
22 in
yeah,
April.
I was thinking that you were like 23 or 24, man.
It's my sister.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the fact that you guys are in New York, living the lives that you guys are living at the ages that you guys are at, that's also different than the experience that I had. By the time I moved to New York, I turned 30 like the year that I moved to New York. So I moved to New York in 2013 in March, and then I turned 30 that December. So I was already at a different stage of my life, but at the same time, you know, when I hear about the things that you guys are doing and the types of experiences that you guys are having, it feels like you guys are further advanced. Whereas, you know, I felt like I had to reach my 30s to live the kind of life that you guys are living now in your early 20s. But I don't know if that's a generational thing or if that's just you guys are, you know,
Well, I
advanced.
think I would will start by saying that it's like a huge, mm, a huge, not blessing, but like a privilege to live here in the city at this young a age
Mhm.
without having been raised here.
Yeah.
Like kind of getting implanted at your young adult stage because it's really hard to do that.
Hmm.
Um, and also we went to boarding school, so we kind of grew up in a different way than a lot of people.
Hmm.
So I think by the time we got here, we'd already experienced like dealing with our own lives and like controlling what we do on a day-to-day basis.
True.
If we hadn't had that, getting pushed into New York City would have been so screwed up. I would have no idea what to do with myself. Well, I didn't
Yeah.
when I first moved here. It was
I mean,
crazy.
even
I mean,
coming
you
from
just
boarding
got
school, like even like coming from boarding school, I feel like when I got here, it just kind of hit me like a truck. Like first week, it was kind of like, oh, I've been here before. I've visited here before. Like I know where this place is. I know where that place is. Like it'll be fine. And then a month goes by, and it's just kind of like your everyday life is so jam packed with everything that's going on in the city. You kind of like you get a little tired, and then I'd say like at month 3, I was like, oh, I need to get out of here.
Hmm.
And then like 6 months go by, and it's kind of become more normalized, and you're able to keep up with the pace of the city a little bit better. And what was once like the grandest city in the world, just becomes like your path to class. Like
Yeah.
I'm walking, like I see the Empire State Building on my way to class, and I'm just like, I hate class, like, or whatever it is, whatever's on my mind. Like, oh no, I have a quiz coming up, or like I gotta go do my homework after this. Like, it kind of takes away from, I think, like how grand this city is.
Mhm.
And like I said, because of the activities that I do, which is mainly like school, I stay in my box, and that kind of, I think, in a lot of ways for me, has like killed the image of New York. Like you asked earlier, like, is this a long-term thing? Like one of the reasons I came here, like I said, was like opportunities, like the job opportunities and the internship opportunities. And I think it's still like true that opportunities here are great. So I do see myself living here at least for some portion of my life in order to like hopefully boost my career.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's been taking a toll for sure.
Yeah.
And I've thought about like where I want to move outside of New York, and I think it helps that like opportunities are arising everywhere. And I think I'm very lucky that I've been able to like live in a lot of different places in my life and like get exposed to different places, different things. So that like going forward, when I'm looking for those like opportunities, I feel like wherever I am in the world, it'll be easier to have that transition. Which I think is another thing that New York has given me, is the ability to deal with like a lot and then
Yeah.
like figure it out and keep going.
Yeah, for sure.
How long did it take you to adjust?
To adjust to New York?
Yeah, to be able to like think clearly.
Dude, all right. I mean, if I'm being completely honest, I feel like my entire time that I spent in New York was just one long, like, drug and alcohol fueled, just like party. And by
How
the
long
time,
was that?
almost 5 years.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
it's a good amount of time.
yeah. It was. I By the time that Sierra and I left, we were doing so because it it just felt like the party was over, and it felt like someone had turned the lights on in the nightclub, you know, and they're like, "All right, you gotta get out." That was the feeling that I had for myself, and I think it's because, you know, the things that I was doing and the way that I was spending my time, you know, I just burned myself out in that respect, and it was no longer fulfilling any kind of need. And a lot of the things that I was doing, I was just doing out of habit, not necessarily because it was something that I wanted to continue doing. Like the one thing that I keep up with is the jujitsu, and that if I wasn't living in New York and wasn't in the situation that I was in at the time that I started it, like I don't know how many more years I would have had to live before I started that part of my life. But yeah, the time that I'm spending in New York now, like when I come back to visit, I have a completely different perspective, even because I am more centered and grounded in who I am and what it is that I'm looking for. Whereas before in New York, it was just kind of looking for, just being distracted by all the shiny, pretty things that exist, and that exists in spades in the city of New York. Whatever kind of fun that you want to have, like someone's gonna package it up and sell it to you. And that was the realization. I was like, oh wait, all this stuff that I'm doing and experiencing, it's stuff that I felt like I was being taken advantage of. Like my energy, my life energy, the money that I was making, I was then turning around and spending it on things that people were trying to sell me instead of being more proactive and doing more discovery and being more things of myself and for myself, as opposed to just like consuming shit. But like by the time that I left, I was just sick and tired of consuming, and the time that I've spent away has just got me in a better state of mind to contribute and to produce. I mean, if I were to move back to New York now, I feel like it would be a completely different story. But it isn't what it is. I live where I live now, and that's cool with me.
Definitely. Yeah.
When I first got here, I was still skating like a lot.
Mhm.
I wasn't climbing as much, but like skating was the big thing. And actually, I'm very lucky that I'm a very activity oriented person. I've not really gone a period in my life where I wasn't super involved in some kind of like sport
Mhm.
or hobby very very intensely.
Yeah.
So wherever I go, I can kind of just like find that, and then I'm pretty set.
Yeah.
And when I came, I would go to Tompkins Square Park a lot,
Mhm.
kind of over there.
Yeah.
And then within a few days, I kind of got like attached to this group of skaters, and we'd go out and film all day. And I also came during the summer, so every day we were free.
Oh yeah.
And we were just doing that a lot, and they'd be partying so much and doing all that kind of stuff, and I hated it. But I was like, I guess this is what I'm gonna do now because other
Right.
people are doing it. I'm doing it with them, so that's a good thing. And then I started climbing more again, and I was like, okay, I'd rather do this.
Yeah.
I think like the first time I came to New York, like as a young adult, it was like once I started going to high school in Connecticut, and then I would come like, visit my brother or see family and things like that. And in my head, New York was so different than what it's like living here every day. Because when I'd come to visit, yeah, it's like 2, 3 days max where I'm kind of in this place where it's never quiet and there's always something going on. And like it wouldn't usually it's not just me coming to the city. Like I'd be here with like my closest friends from high school. So every like second I would be here was just like super engaging, super fun, like just a great time. And then you come and live here and you start to realize like
Yeah.
it's not all just like fun times and
For
like
sure.
once you kind of have to do some of the less fun things but still in this space it gets really tiring, I think. But I feel like there's no place I'd rather be. If that makes like I'm not necessarily like super happy to be here. I'm not like not happy to be here, but when I think about it and I'm like, okay, well like if you're not here, like I thought about transferring schools and I was thinking like, oh, where would you rather go? And there was nowhere that was like, oh, I need to go to that place. So while this doesn't feel exactly like home, there's no place I'd rather be. At the same time, like I almost don't want to be here. It's like a very weird, weird situation of like, I know this is probably what's best for me, but like, what's more attractive in the moment? Like, is a campus school where I get to like live in a dorm with all my friends and see people very regularly and like have that community feel versus like walking 20 blocks to class and then I go back to my apartment and then that's like the end of the day and it's just a little different and I don't know. I think the more time I spend here, the more I start to appreciate like the time I have. But it's a lot.
Yeah, for sure. What in terms of the things that you are happy to be in New York for, the different experiences, like specifically in the hospitality and service area? Like, can you give me an example of something that you got to work on, or even just like experience that you're like, okay, this is what makes me happy to be in New York for this reason?
Yeah. This past summer, I had an amazing opportunity to work with the Brooklyn Nets on their like events team. Um, and right, like most states have teams and things like that you can be a part of. But over the summer, I was interning for them, and then into the fall, I continued to work with them. And I feel like being able to be in school, but also like go to these like very say like big events, right?
Yeah.
And helping to like in whatever small way, like helping to put on that production. Um, I think the reason why I love the hospitality industry so much is because you can see it on people's face when they're having a good time. So, like planning a party, planning like helping guests at a game, and then you see them with their big smiles and their friends, and they're super entranced in whatever's going on. It's like that is the pay. I'd say like the spiritual pay,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
the monetary pay, but like the payoff is you get to actually like observe these people having a great time, and you get to know like, hey, like I helped create that experience for them, and that is what drove me to the hospitality industry. And being able to do it on a scale like with Brooklyn Nets and at Barclays Center is not something that I thought I'd ever be able to do, and like especially not as a 20-year-old like intern. So
Sure.
that was kind of one experience that I thought was really cool. But another thing is like my school, one of my school clubs offers tours of hotels in around the city. So being that it's New York City, we have some of like the best hotels in the world. And being a hospitality student, we're able to access like tours from people at the hotel, and we're able to see kind of behind the scenes a little bit, and observing all of that, understanding what goes into a guest stay or like an interaction at Barclays Center is all something that I think is helping me grow as a person, but also as a professional. So I think that's kind of been the main draw of New York City is that opportunity.
What about you, Matt? Like, what about living in New York? Like, what is it that makes you glad to live here as far as like what it is that you're interested in and currently in your passions? And how do those, where's that that intersecting part of the Venn diagram? Like, what's in there?
The people. It's always like the thing about actually I'll talk specifically about climbing and then a little bit about skating
Yeah.
and then EMS, because with climbing it's like an outdoor activity. New York City is not an outdoor city.
Right.
So, I mean, in the Northeast in general, compared to the West Coast, but specifically in New York City, they're super scrappy. People who climb here, they really want to climb. Because if you're not, like in Colorado, if you're, just a person, you'll probably end up climbing because that's what everyone does.
Okay.
Here, it's like if you're not a climber, there's no chance you're gonna. I mean, these days climbing is kind of in the boom phase, so
Yeah.
people are trying out climbing. But people who go every day, who like make the time and effort to train and then go outside, go on these weekend trips, it's like a really intense passion. And so everyone who climbs, there's that immediate connection between the two of you before you even really get to know each other, because you're both like, okay, you spend your time and effort on this in this place where that is not an accessible thing.
Yep.
Same with skating. Like in the West Coast, the sun is always out, concrete is pretty smooth, and like a lot of people skate,
For sure.
and people understand skating
Yeah.
because that's where it's from, California. And then on the East Coast, anywhere like Philly, New York City, Boston, any of those places, it's like it's cold, it sucks, all the roads are like really rough.
Yeah.
People hate you.
You have to ride in the street.
Yeah, people try to hit you. People
Yeah.
nobody likes you. So if you're a skater,
Yeah.
you're really intense with it. That's your thing.
Yeah.
You're a skater, and then if you meet other skaters, you have a thing together. And it's just like that. And then I also climbing and skating, and other sports like surfing, paragliding. So you're interacting with your environment. You're interacting with physical things. In skating, that's like stairs, rails, ledges. Climbing, it's rocks. And I think doing those activities really changed my perspective on what I'm looking at. So when I walk around New York City, even now, even though I'm not skating too much, I'm like, oh, dude, that curb is like
Yeah.
prime, or like that rail that's a good looking rail.
And I see this all the time. Like anytime we're out, sees the smallest crevice, he's just like over there, like seeing like how he can hold
Yeah,
it.
and then with climbing, I'm walking around, I'm just looking out like, oh, that would be such a good climb. And
Yeah.
so I get to see this city in a really strange way,
For
and I
sure.
love that so much. And then in terms of EMS,
Uh-huh.
there's a lot of people here, um,
A lot of
and
wild shit that goes on.
a lot of wild shit, but also a lot of normal shit, like
Yeah.
old people and
True.
people with chronic conditions. With this number of people, that stuff is happening very frequently on
Yeah.
a daily basis.
Yeah.
So that just means that there are a lot of people that you could help here,
Mhm.
and then that also means there are a lot of people that you can get to know.
Mm-hmm.
In EMS, in the 911 system, when you get a call, it's usually people don't expect to call 911.
Mm-hmm.
So then when you go to their apartment or wherever they're at, that's just like how you find them is how they are.
Right.
So I walked in this lady's apartment and she has like thousands of owl figurines. You can't see her walls. It's just owls and they're all just looking at you. And I was like, this is strange as fuck.
Yeah.
And just stuff like that
Yeah.
is like so cool.
You get to interact with people like at the raw sense of like who they are, where
Yeah.
they are, when they are.
And like they're not worried about
Fully
how they
unfiltered.
present themselves
Yeah.
because something's going on.
They need help.
You're not worrying about how they present themselves because you approach the situation with a mindset of, whatever it is, like this person needs something.
Absolutely.
So it's just a really pure form of interaction.
Absolutely. And a lot of the stuff that I've been thinking about and reading about and meditating on is like getting to that core of who it is that people are. And Ryan, it was really interesting to hear you talk about, the value that you get out of hospitality and service and, being able to bring a smile to people's faces and, delivering that value and connecting with people on that level. And then Matthew, to hear that in the EMS thing. And, that's that common thread of like, ultimately, like the most important thing, in my opinion, all this other stuff that we talk about and the details of what it is that we do or how it is that we ended up doing it. I think if you dig deep enough, like there's going to be that core reason or the root of why it is that you want to do what it is that you want to do. Yeah, that is so critical. In signing up for EMS, was that something that, like, how did you determine that that was something that you wanted to pursue?
It's just totally random. Not totally. There is a story.
Okay.
It was actually kind of far back.
Okay.
If we wanted to.
Let's do it.
When I first started climbing in
Mhm.
2019, I was only bouldering, and I'm a very obsessive person. So I was bouldering for like 10 hours every day, if I could, every day, and that's all I would do. And for those who know about bouldering, or even any sport, if you do it that much,
Mhm.
bad things will happen to your body
Mm-hmm.
because you're using the same thing, same muscle groups, same range, range of motion every single day. And when you do that, your body, it develops imbalances. It gets tired, it gets stressed out, it starts to break down. So I was getting overuse injuries every day. My body was in so much pain. Same with skating. And so then I was thinking a lot about like how I could cure my own problems, and I was looking into this like physical therapy, sports science of it all.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, this would be cool. Maybe I want to be a PT when I grow up. Maybe something in the sports science field. Then I realized how boring that was to me. I would just like be reading through these long ass papers about this tendon, and I'm like, it's all right. And then I met a friend through climbing. Actually, it's funny. He dropped out of NYU his freshman year,
Mm-hmm.
and we met at the boulders. And I met him, and then 2 days later, he enlisted in the army and then left. And we stayed like best friends. And throughout that process, he ended up joining the Ranger Regiment and then went through the Special Operations Combat Medic School. And he stays in my apartment whenever he comes back home.
Mm-hmm.
So he's kind of like my long distance roommate. And whenever he come back, he'd always be studying like whatever it is he's studying. And he'd like run all his trauma lanes on me, do IVs on me, like just whatever he was learning. And I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And then I left school as well and needed something to do. And then found the NYU Langone EMT program,
Mm-hmm.
which was it was sponsored by a grant that they had just gotten, so it was free. So there was really no reason not to do it.
Nice.
And then I enrolled in that class, and it was just like it was the first time I was going to school where there were no barriers between my waking up and going to class. I was like, oh, let's go. I'm so ready. I would like wake up early, get my uniform, iron my uniform. I'd like be the first one there, last one to leave. And that was a very new experience for me.
Sick.
So it was like clearly the thing that I wanted to do. And then I realized that I can combine that with my climbing
Mm-hmm.
and work towards um, joining a search and rescue team. Ideally, Yosemite Search and Rescue. They have like kind of the elite high angle
Mhm.
search and rescue operations. Um, so yeah, what was the question?
Oh no, I mean,
What am I talking about right now?
Talking
how,
about
how do we?
Oh,
yeah,
EMS.
Yeah, EMS.
Um, yeah, so it was really just like a random connecting of the dots that's still happening.
Yeah, for sure. That connecting of the dots, it feels random, but if you put yourself out there enough, and do enough things, I think we're kind of wired to find the commonalities and all the different things that we're spending time and energy doing, whether it be something that we're spending time and energy in school because you're in school like on a specific program, or something due to like a hobby. Ryan, like you were talking about the classes that you were taking. You were telling us before how you were thinking about switching your
Concentration.
concentration. Has there been anything that you've studied in school that you've come across that's been put in front of you as you're working in class, like that has like really resonated with you, that you were like, oh, I didn't know this existed? Or
I'd say somewhat in class, less of like a lesson that I sat through and was like, oh, this is the main takeaway. What I realized more than anything since starting to study hospitality is, I think for a lot of people when they think hospitality, it's mainly like hotels or like maybe restaurants, bars, clubs, kind of a thing.
Mhm.
But what I've realized since I started studying, since I started working in the industry, is like hospitality is really everywhere you go.
Mhm.
Like whatever industry someone is like even for example like banks, they all have like their events team, which like they just plan, not just, but they plan like parties and then conferences and things like that. um so like you can be working hospitality, but like for financial services, you can be in hospitality at airports, you can be hospitality at like arenas and stadiums. Like you're not just confined to like working in a hotel or a restaurant. So coming into the schooling, I was like, oh, like one day I'm going to be a general manager of a hotel. Like that's the end goal. Since kind of studying it a little bit more, my takeaway is like you have no idea like where in hospitality you're going to end up.
Mhm.
For me, I think the big thing, like I said, it's that personal connection, that experiential like value that you provide to guests.
Mhm.
That I think no matter what, as long as I'm doing that, I don't really care like what part of hospitality. Not that I don't care, but like I came in with such a strong idea of where I was going,
Right.
and then it was just completely dismantled. So
Yeah.
I think one thing I've learned through school and New York is like that happened for like career wise, but just like
Definitely.
life wise. Sometimes like everything kind of falls apart, but it's not a bad thing. Like now my horizon's much broader and I have
Mhm.
like more opportunity, more options.
Yep.
At the time, it definitely felt like, oh my God, like I thought I was gonna work in hotels. This is ruining everything. But like the more I kind of sat through, it was like, oh well, like I'm actually not that interested in hotels after. Like this was way cool. Like I ran, like I said, I was on the events team this summer, and I was really enjoyed events. So I'm taking a class in events and conferences right now, like learning how to plan those events on my own and things like that. So yeah, just kind of realizing that maybe 17 was a little early to decide what I wanted to do for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And it's fine. That's fine. I don't need to, I don't need to have everything charted out.
Yeah.
Definitely. And that doesn't mean you don't have things charted out. Like you can have things charted out, but like when things don't go the way you want them to, like don't be too worried, and
Yeah.
things will kind of work themselves out. And you'll find, I think, the deeper you dive into something, the more passionate you'll be. So like finding my passion within the industry, knowing that like, again, it all comes down to like that experience that the guest is having, like knowing that you're able to provide that wherever.
Yeah.
That's kind of what's drawing me towards it.
I think that's a really Ryan, you're so wise for your
Yeah,
age.
damn.
Like
Shit.
to even come to the conclusion that, you know, just because this didn't work out, that but you still have that optimism, I think is really powerful. Like, I don't know, people it's really easy to get caught up in the plan or the idea of what it is that you thought you wanted to do. And if you feel like giving that up feels like giving up on yourself, you're like, but I told myself I was going to be this or do this. But I think as long as your eyes on the prize, as far as like again that core thing that like that you're focused on, the outfit of what life has wrapped around you, in terms of like what job it is that you're doing, where you're doing it, the type of people that you get to work with. Those things are all external as long as the core focus of what it is, the value that you want to provide to the world, as long as you have your eyes on that and just keep your eyes on that, like you will shift and travel through time and space and still find that you were achieving your goal, even though the plans may not have worked out.
Yeah, true.
I mean, even before hotels, like prior to really even knowing what hospitality industry was, this all kind of started with like when they were in school and my parents would go to visit them, like I'd be home alone and I'd have to cook for myself. And like something about food, and I think like this says a lot, but Ratatouille is one of my favorite movies of all time. And I think that's all about food telling a story and food as art. And I kind of like I realized that pretty early on is that like food really is like an art form, and we talk about like food as a link between cultures. Like food is so powerful, and there's so much more to food than just like whatever like calories and like and whatever like the nutrients. It's the story behind it is what's important. So I wanted to be a chef, but I thought like I also like enjoy or not enjoy because I guess I don't really have that much experience, but like business has always been something that I've been interested in, and I thought hospitality was a good way to kind of like meld like the artisticness of like creating something, and for me that's like an experience. I create the experience, but it all comes down to like what can you make the person like, what story can you leave them with. Like one thing we talk about so much in classes are like how everything, not everything, but a lot of things in hospitality are like intangible. You don't stay at the hotel because like you get to take it home with you, but like it's a memory and an experience that you get to take away. So like coming back to the food point of like creating something, right? So being home alone cooking for myself is where it all kind of started, and then I've been to like cooking camp and I really enjoyed that. And this summer I'm hoping to go to culinary school and get like a basic certificate, so like 6 week program, and just like learning really like the fundamentals of like French technique of cooking. So this has been something that deep down I've always kind of like wanted to do. I've always wanted to be in the kitchen, realizing that might not be my end career goal. I definitely see this program as an opportunity to like better understand food, maybe end up in a kitchen someday, and that is something I'm interested in. But it's kind of fluid, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, I think that food and like the story that it tells is what initially got me into like the whole experience-based interactions. And it's been great to see it like grow into something I thought was just a way to keep myself alive by eating into like, oh well, now I can see myself in a career with this. So.
Yeah, you can have fun with it too. It's not just about getting the job done. Something that I was really curious about, and we can start it from the hospitality point of view and like the experience, but like your guys' trip to Africa, like was there like first off, like what kind of a place did you guys stay at?
So we moved around a little bit.
Okay.
So like
Where in Africa were you guys?
Yeah. So we were in Tanzania.
Okay.
More specifically, we were in the Serengeti for a safari. And we started in the northern Serengeti, and then we flew down to southern Serengeti. But before all of that, we landed in Arusha, and our first night was spent in like a lodge, and it's like a big-ish town in Tanzania. So we were in town for that, and then we fly out to northern Serengeti, and there's like no people, there's nothing. It's just miles and miles of grasslands, trees, and hills. And we're driving, and we see this hill, and our safari guide was like, "That's the camp." And I was like, "Oh, like I don't see any like buildings or anything like where we to stay." And then we like go around, and then there's like huts and bungalow kind of situations. And it was beautiful. Like
Yeah.
one thing that was really nice is just being able to like kind of immerse yourself in the nature. Like
Hmm.
there were walls, but it was like a screen, basically like a screen, a net screen.
Uh-huh.
So like you go to sleep and all you can see is grasslands, hills, and trees. You wake up, all you can see is grasslands, hills, and trees, and
Crazy.
then you go driving for like miles, and all you see is more grassland, hills, and trees. So, um, but I think one thing that I took away from that experience specifically was, given that we're in Tanzania, like don't get me wrong, the place we're staying was beautiful, super nice, and like everything was amazing.
Hmm.
But it's not like you're in New York City. It's not like a giant glass skyscraper that like has every amenity under the sun. What stood out for in the northern Serengeti from that specific portion of the trip was the how genuine the staff was,
Hmm.
and like the team that was taking care of us. They were just like it just felt so genuine
There was
between.
like a super distinct difference between the hospitality and, you call it service at some nice hotel anywhere else, and then
Hmm.
in Tanzania, everyone was just like a nice person, and they really cared about how you were doing that day, and they really cared about what you needed and what you wanted, and there wasn't for me at least, it didn't feel like there was a barrier between like server and served. It
Hmm.
was like, oh, we're kind of just hanging out.
Yeah.
But it happens to be that you're also being paid to, help us out with things.
Right.
But there wasn't that social barrier
Hmm.
that usually exists.
Yeah.
And that felt really good. I think that has to do with just the people in Tanzania. I don't know what about it though.
Yeah, I couldn't really put a like pin on it, but that's what kind of makes it like almost not magical, but like it
Yeah.
makes it unlike anything else. Like if it was a formula, then everyone would recreate it. Like, oh, like
Of course.
if this is how to be genuine, like I'll train my staff to do that. Like that, you can't do that. It just
Right.
needs to happen naturally, and it's a lot about like the culture and like the company culture, but also like probably culture, like culture. Um, like I've worked in hotels before, and it's like luxury hotels,
Mhm.
and it's I've talked with the staff, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, I had to wake up so early to get here. I'm
Right.
so tired. Like I have a 12-hour shift today." Whatever it was, it's like obviously it feels like a job, and I'm sure it did for the people in Tanzania. But something about the way that they interacted with us,
Just like super genuine,
So
like person to person connection.
really,
Right?
and like I think one of the highlights of the trip was it was my grandpa's 80th birthday.
Mm.
Which is why we went on the trip. And they bring out a cake for his birthday, and then they start singing like traditional Tanzanian like folk song kind of a situation, um, and it was like, I mean, that song I now know all the lyrics to it, and like
Yeah,
it's
we
like
all
burned in
started
my
dancing.
head, and
Yeah.
that they were all like going around in circles around the table dancing, and just seeing like how much fun they're having,
Yeah.
like it's infectious. So like it felt like a even greater experience for us just to see them like with smiles. And
That's probably the biggest things I took away was that every time we interacted with someone, they were on the job. Whether it was like a safari guide, like a hotel staff manager, staff
Mhm.
member, cook, whatever they were doing, they were, working.
Right.
But they were just like so chill and very happy to do what they were, seemingly happy to do what they were doing, at least in terms of their attitude and how they conducted their business.
Hmm.
So coming back, actually, you know, I used to hate going to classes
Hmm.
and working at the gym and having to do that and like having to interact with people at the job, be like, just going through the motions.
Hmm.
But since coming back, and this probably also has to do with having like a nice break from all that and having a nice vacation. But now, like when I go into the gym, I'm very focused on having good attitude and like uh, interacting with people so that they feel like, oh, I'm like welcome at this gym, and and this person wants to help me, and they're also a climber. We can just be friends, which I think has really helped with my outlook on the job and also just kind of everything else.
Yeah, man. I so much of it. It's a lot about like your mindset and your perspective, and what is it about the Western world today and like society where like especially in New York, man. Like one of the things that you'll experience in New York more so than any other city, in my opinion, is you walk in and the staff there thinks they're cooler than you, and like that it's a pain in their ass for them to do their job to take your order or to bring you a glass of water or something. And I don't know, man. In my opinion, I think it's entitlement, but it's there on the flip side of that is there is a certain like me against the world type of attitude that gets implanted in Americans very largely just, and it almost feels like you have to have that point of view, otherwise you won't get to live a life that you feel like you deserve. I mean, but it's a really delicate balance in the West, right? Like, how do you balance like what you think you're worth versus what you're getting paid versus the type of job that you have versus the type of job that you want? And it's not to say that people think they're too cool for jobs in general, but I feel like maybe there's something like there's some of that too. But I don't know.
I remember I wrote like a paper for one of my classes about like service culture differences between Western and Eastern cultures, because a lot of people say like hospitality in the East, like Asia, is far better than in the West. Maybe partially due to like lower wages, so like you're able to have more people per customer, which is a thing we talk about a lot. Is like how can you maximize value for your customer? And like I think one thing you'll see between like a luxury hotel and then like a select service, the main difference is labor. Like sorry. So yeah, in the West, we prioritize like individualistic like achievement, and you gotta put yourself out there in order to achieve what you want. Versus like the East, it's much more harmonic and like everyone's working together to achieve one goal. So I think when it comes to service and helping other people and seeing it not as like, oh, how can I put myself first, but like how can I put the company first? How can I put my customer first? How can I put the guest first? Like that comes I think, much more naturally in Eastern cultures. I mean, growing up, I have my hyuna who like, and my nuna who are always like, you respect your elders. Like you learn that from a very young age of like how to, even if it's like you don't want to, like that's what the rules are, so like you follow them. Versus in the West, so it's like how can you make yourself stand out from the crowd? And not to say like Asian people don't stand out from the crowd, but it's just like in the culture, and from a culture perspective, like that's less prioritized. So I think when you talk about like these people thinking they're cooler than you, and you walk in and it's like you expect one thing and they're expecting another thing, and those things clash, and they tend to care less about friction between customers in the West. So no surprise really that you might walk into somewhere, and you said like specifically the Western, in New York specifically, you walk in somewhere and then they think they're cooler than you, or they think you're not worth helping at the time, or whatever it is, even if it's their job. It's just I'm sure that happens a lot all around the world, but some people just kind of like suck it up and are like, well, regardless of how I feel today, like this is my job and these are my roles, so like I will fulfill them. And I think there's definitely a lot of good things to standing out, and there's definitely a lot of good things to kind of working with the pack and helping everyone move forward. So I think finding that balance is kind of what's most important, rather than committing to one like ideology.
I think it also in some aspects has to do with like the state of the on the ground economy and the people. So like in the U.S., in terms of the American dream, it's very much like you can do everything you want to do, and that's a very stressful thing. Versus other people may have certain perspectives where it's like you do what you can, and that's a good thing. If you can do this thing, that's a great opportunity you have, and you should do it with all your passion because that's what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But here it's always like I'm doing this, but what will I do next? What will come of this?
Right.
Um, and I think with that also comes like a very competitive nature, because at least for me, still, and a lot more a few years ago, I was always looking at other people like they're doing this, I'm doing this. How can I do what they're doing, or how can I do something cooler than what they're doing?
Mm-hmm.
Because right now I work at a climbing gym. I mean, no offense to everyone who works at a climbing gym, but that's not a it's not a career. It's not that cool of a thing. But coming back from Tanzania, I was like, oh man, I'm so blessed to like be able to climb here for free, interact with exactly all the people I want to interact with, and not really have to interact with anybody else.
Yeah.
And like my shifts don't feel like a job, just hanging out with friends and doing
Yeah.
tasks sometimes. Um, so that shift in perspective, I kind of came from visiting Tanzania, among other things. So I feel much less competitive
Mm-hmm.
with, because my peers, they're all in college or graduating college, getting nice jobs
Mm-hmm.
and doing cool things. Not that I'm not, but
Right.
we're in different worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to be very insecure about that, and because the expectation is to go along that path. So getting a tech job out of school is like a very commendable thing.
Mm-hmm.
Working in a climbing gym is not. Uh, but now I'm like, just these days I'm more happy for them. Like, oh, that's super cool, but not really what I would enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing what I would enjoy. So we're both kind of on the same page
There-
with that.
I'm like that. I'm so excited to hear that from you guys. Like, I think it's so easy to get caught up in always just comparing yourself against other people. And it's not to say that what other people are doing or what other people are achieving aren't like great things, but it's also like the question of like for what. And then if the for what isn't rooted back to like because it's fulfilling to me or because it makes me happy, like then it's for nothing, right? And that's it. Your perspective on this is heartwarming to hear.
And I feel like you talked earlier about like Western people with their jobs, and like I think Americans specifically, and this is from Trevor Noah, so like
Yeah.
it's not an original thought, but he was saying like one of his stand-up bits was he was talking about talking to like a French person, and he was like, "So what do you do?" And then the French person was like telling him his hobbies, and he's like, "No, like what do you do for a living?"
Yeah,
And he's like, "Oh, like I eat, I sleep, I poo," and like no, like what do you do for a job? So it's like for most Americans, you ask like, "What do you do?" It's like, "Oh, boom, like I'm a
Yeah.
student, I work here, blah blah blah." Like
Yeah.
these are my credentials, kind of a thing. Versus like in other parts of the world, and I don't know if this is like all of France, but like yeah, like I think like other parts of the world, there's maybe less incentive or like less priority or like less pressure to like talk and show off your kind of like where you are career wise, and it's just more about like what do you enjoy from life, not just like what do you work. So I think because in like America we put so much pressure and like we prioritize like our careers and everything like that, and it's always kind of like in the forefront of our minds. I think a lot of people start to dread their jobs, and I mean it is work, so it's not always going to be play.
Right.
But understanding that like eventually like this will pay off, or whatever you're doing in the moment, that maybe it's not the most enjoyable part of your job, or maybe you're in like a slow season and it's not as interesting as it was or is, like finding ways to kind of fill that time with other things and like find other things to enjoy and kind of like put less focus on the work and more on we work so that we can do these things, and what are those things, like figuring out that and then prioritizing that. I think would help a lot of people with the whole like hating their job situation.
That's why I like the question. Like I like typically ask, what do you do? And then once they tell me like, oh, I'm a student, or I work in finance, then I'll be like, oh, but how do you spend your time? Because that's what I want to know, and that's what I want to tell these people. It's like, well, I work at a climbing gym, but this is how I spend my time. If I have time, this is what I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good point.
I think I'm a little bit too much on the other side of that, where like everything I do for like my whole life has been like so I can get to the next spot. I studied hard in middle school so I can get to high school. I studied hard in high school so I can get to a good college. And then I think once like I said, when I first got here, it hit me like a truck. So I think working my whole life just to get into a good college and then achieving that and then getting here and it not being exactly what I put up on the pedestal, like, right, I thought this would make me so happy that like I get to go to school and I made this milestone and then I get here and it's not what I expected. And to be honest, it wasn't like the best time that in the beginning. It was quite a hard adjustment for me. So going through that made me realize again that kind of things don't always work out, but now I'm like a year and a half in and I'm kind of starting to enjoy myself a lot more. So yeah, like getting more comfortable with things kind of not working out and then
Yeah.
figuring it out.
Yeah, it's every person is like the way that society, like the structure that exists in life, the things that are structured, like they're structured for a reason, and it's not to say that once you have reached the end of the structure that you've like accomplished the mission and then you're done. You know, the structure exists just to give some kind of a framework, but then everything after that is kind of up to you. So, you know, it's not about achieving what other people have set out for you to do that makes you a success. It's about being able to live a life where you are being true to yourself and, you know, feel fulfilled. That's really what it's about. And you will not find fulfillment in crossing things off of a list that someone else has put together for you. And I don't think anyone has ever meant it for it to be done that way. But you know, given that so many people go through the education system, and it's kind of common for all, it very much gets put into that categorization of like, if you do this, if you know, then that means you've accomplished X, Y, and Z. But really, accomplishment, fulfillment, it's all personal. Like you have to define that for yourself, and it again, it has to be rooted back to what you truly think is valuable, you know, for yourself from your own perspective. That perspective is super important.
I think about that a lot, but in thinking about that, I've also come to realize that kind of pursuing your passions and what will fulfill yourself internally, intrinsically, is it's actually not that common of a thing that people are able to do, because there are a lot of my friends who need to finish school quickly so that they can get a job and support their family. Ryan and I and my sister, we can kind of do whatever we want. If we don't make it out and do like great things and make a lot of money, our parents or grandparents, like, they're gonna be fine. They're gonna be more than fine, actually. So we have this opportunity now to live in a very free style. Anything we want to do, any goals we have in our future, we can kind of drop everything and go for it. And there are like kind of two ends of the spectrum where you can do that, where you have everything or if you have nothing.
Yep.
And we're kind of in that end of the spectrum where we have everything we need. Our family has everything we need, for the most part, financially. So we can focus all of our energy on fulfilling our own, you know, whatever will make us feel like our best self. It's just like, you know, it's not that common.
That's true.
So really thankful for that.
Honestly, like the ability to be studying hospitality. Like, I think about my dad's experience with college and his parents pushing him to be a doctor. So he's doing like biology and all those classes, and now he's in tech. So like, and he says like, oh, I still use like the scientific method today. Like, yeah, that's great, but like overall, I feel like you were pushed into a direction that you didn't really want to go down all the way. So being able to be, first of all, like understanding that hospitality is something that I'm interested in from a young age, and then being able to like really pour everything into that, not needing to worry about like, oh, but like what if I don't make as much money here as I would in as a doctor, lawyer, finance, whatever it is. Being able to study something that I'm passionate in, and realizing like when you're actually passionate about something, it doesn't feel like work always. So like you're able to, I think I would be able to achieve a lot more, I think, in the hospitality sphere than I would as a doctor. Like I wouldn't even become a doctor realistically. Like I don't think I have it in me to like get into medical school, let alone get through pre-med. So like, or switch those, but like, yeah, I think having that kind of safety net allows me to explore something that I'm passionate in, and that brings me immense joy. And
Absolutely.
and it's also just a great opportunity for me to like work wise. I think being passionate in it really helps.
I don't know about you, but I'll take this moment to shout out our parents and our grandparents, because if you kind of look at the three of us, my sister Katie, my brother Ryan, and myself Matthew. Um, my sister is a public servant. She works in public policy and state government to help other people. That's really what she wants. She's a Christian and she's very service oriented. My brother Ryan, he is in hospitality, and based on what he's saying, and has been saying, it's very much about like making another person feel something. And then for myself, EMS and just like medicine in general is very people oriented, service oriented. So and for me, I think that also comes from recognizing that our parents and our grandparents put in all this work to give us this life, and we can kind of put all that energy into what we want to do. So if we're going to do that and we have the opportunity, then at least for me, then at least we should do everything we can to use that opportunity to service other people's needs. And I think about that a lot when I'm like looking into the future.
I said and wants because my brother and I have had this conversation a lot about like luxury hospitality, whether or not he thinks it's necessary, and he makes valid points, and we've gone back and forth for hours about this topic. But no, it's being able to help other people and service other people is something that we were just taught growing up is like a good thing to do, and I think we have our parents and grandparents to thank for that for sure. Like,
and also the people we were raised with in the mid Illinois,
definitely.
just like surrounded by good ass people.
Yeah.
Everyone's just a good person.
How blessed are we that instead of focusing on having to fight tooth and nail to provide for ourselves and for people that depend on us, to have the opportunity to instead put that light outward,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
be able to share it, spread the love.
Precisely.
Yeah, we've been going for about an hour, so I think
Whoa.
that wraps it up. Thanks, guys, for taking the time to talk with me and hang out with me while I'm visiting here in New York. It means a lot. It makes me really happy and proud to be related to you guys, and to
Same.
see you guys coming up like this. So, thanks, guys. Anything you want to say to the camera before we sign off?
Like and subscribe.
I just want to shout out Uncle David here. I definitely look up to you, and not only you right now, but kind of the path that you've been on, and especially right now in this kind of, I don't know how you feel about it, but obviously getting laid off and having to live in a world where that's a very hard thing. It must be, parts of your life must be kind of rough at the moment, but taking this time to not dwell too much on that and looking at it as an opportunity to be like, all right, this thing went away. Now I have these things, and I actually got more time to do these things. That's pretty awesome. That's been like a kind of a guiding light for me in what I'm doing right now.
Thanks, guys. Have faith. All right, thanks all.
Podcast.